Hi there, my name is Lynda and I live in London, and I've been teaching with BlingABC for just over a year. So this video is focusing on oral and written feedback that we give to our students and their parents, and we'll cover the big five: why, who, when, what, and how. Why do we give feedback, who to and when? What should we include and not include in our feedback? How do we use different strategies for error correction, and how do we increase the effectiveness of our oral and written feedback? So let's get started. Why do we give feedback to our children? Well, we feed things in our daily lives, don't we? Plants, animals, ideas, our minds, ourselves. So they'll grow. So in the same way, we feed our students corrective information, positive information to help them grow and develop as English language learners. So language learning research shows that targeted and effectively delivered feedback increases the language learning outcomes for students. So we can get these two things working together, the targeted, so the who and the when, and the effectively delivered, the what and the how, then our feedback is going to significantly improve our students' language learning as well. So starting with oral feedback, who and when. Who do we give feedback to and when? So in every class, obviously we aim to give each child both positive and corrective feedback using the sandwich approach, or burger. I prefer the burger. Positive first, then corrective, and finish up with positives. But as we all know, with time constraints, we can't correct every error and praise every success. So we need to take into account various factors when making those decisions. How many students are in the class? How much time do we have left in the lesson? That's a biggie. How sensitive is each child to receiving correction in front of their peers? So we have to make those professional judgments about who and when to give feedback throughout the course of every lesson. So on to the what and the how, and starting with the positive. What positive feedback can we give to our students to improve their learning, and how do we go about that? Well, there are two main categories: general feedback and specific feedback. So we give general positive feedback to the group and to individuals. That can be verbal, fantastic, wow, great job, amazing. Or non-verbal, our thumbs up, our high fives, our fist bumps, hearts, trophies, hooray! All sorts of things. And that's great, but what's even better is specific positive feedback. So instead of just saying, oh, that was great, it's much more effective to be specific. For instance, I really like the way you said the th in bath, or wow, you used the past tense so well. You said, I went to school and played with my friends. Then the student knows exactly what you're praising them for, and the rest of the group hears that as well, and they can all apply that to their learning. Modelling back their fluency and expression is also a very good specific feedback strategy. Sometimes a child doesn't realise they've said something with really great expression or fluency, but even if they do, instead of just saying, oh, brilliant, you can say, wow, you said my kite is flying higher, not my kite is flying higher. You said my kite is flying higher. That's fantastic. Then the child knows how they said that, and the rest of the class have a great opportunity to hear that example to model off. So we've talked about the what and the how of giving effective positive feedback. So now we're going to focus on corrective feedback. So what strategies can we use when correcting children's errors? How do we increase the effectiveness of our corrective feedback? So with time constraints in our lessons, we really need to prioritise and target our corrective feedback. Our positive praise can be for general language successes, but our error correction should mainly focus on the target language, as over the course of each lesson, our aim is for the children to gain more control over those very specific target words, phrases, sentence structures, verb forms, etc. So with error correction being such a key component in language learning, let's look at some useful strategies that we can draw on to increase its effectiveness. So some language learning researchers, Lynda and Ranta, identified 6 different corrective strategies that they found effective in their research when teachers are responding to student error. Obviously there are many more, but these are quite good just to have up our sleeve. So if a child says, he has dog, you can just reformulate, a dog, a dog. You can elicit, try and draw out the correct response. He has, but that does have to be used carefully because you would need to know that the child knows the article is missing. So it would be more appropriate if you'd just done some work on article use. You can use a clarification response, sorry, or maybe for our Chinese students, are you sure? Or they might think you've done something wrong, say sorry. You can repeat the incorrect sentence so they have an opportunity to self-correct. He has dog? But with this you usually use intonation, facial expression, or perhaps a fuller sentence. Great, he has dog, but it's got one word missing. So they know that is incorrect and you want them to fix the error. We don't want the distracted children to hear, he has dog, and think it's the correct English form. Or lastly, you can provide meta-linguistic feedback. So meta in this context is beyond in Greek, so the bigger picture, the language we use to talk about language. So in this case, you need an indefinite article. So probably not for our 5-year-olds, but maybe advanced learners, it's a plural. What do you need at the end? Or this verb is in the past tense. So as well as specific verbal error correction, there's lots of visual, oral, kinesthetic techniques that teachers find effective with corrective feedback. So I'm just going to give you a few examples that myself and others have found very helpful. So with pronunciation of multi-syllabic words, you can use your fingers, supermarket. Single syllable, supermarket. Use a robot, supermarket. Clap or use a drum. If pupils miss out a word or add one, you can use your fingers to count, he has a dog, or write out the sentence for the correct visual model. For contractions, I use my contraction card. So yes, it has got she is in it, but we say it fast, she is she's. And using my fingers to emphasize the joining and the speed of it. With pronunciation, I use my cards, and if they're particularly getting a sound wrong, just say th. Look at my tongue, I use my hand to accentuate th, the movement of the tongue. Fever, for instance, I'd say fever. Something like the V, go right up to the camera, look at my tongue, my teeth and my lips. So for articles, it's really tricky. Sometimes I just use a monkey, or just the card itself. That's sometimes helpful. It's to stop them adding that A and E, and orangey. You can snap the word shut with your fingers, and orange. And plurals, 2 dogs pointing to your mouth can be effective. So for correcting sentence structure, sometimes writing out the incorrect produced sentence and the correct version for them to compare and self-correct, or saying it. Using puppets is great. He has dog. He has a dog. And of course, puppets are great for all sorts of feedback. Eliciting correct verb forms, you can give language patterns. For example, if a child says, he goes fish, you could say, great, let's look at the pictures. He goes camping, he goes swimming, he goes fishing. And that gives the child an opportunity, again, to self-correct, which of course is more powerful in language learning than just being told what the answer is. If they can work out an error for themselves, it's a much more powerful learning experience. Giving pupils time and space to think, then respond to your correction is important in the feedback process. So waiting, letting them think for a little bit before responding is very helpful. So now on to written feedback. We need to write feedback reports just for the 1 to 3 students only classes and submit them within 3 hours of your lessons finishing for the day. Each report needs to be 80 words minimum, and we must write reports for every student who enters the classroom, even for a minute or a second, because the system will register they attended. So what to write for these absent students, I'll cover in the Q&A section. So for written feedback, we again use the sandwich approach. Some positive general comments, including 1 or 2 specific language items that the children did well, and 1 or 2 language items they need to work on at home, and some positive comments to finish. So the aim is to write feedback that will help the students improve rather than just pointing out errors, and that doesn't overwhelm them with too many error comments, and is written to praise and motivate them in their language learning. So I'll go into a bit more detail about what should and shouldn't be included in our written reports in the Q&A section next. So time management is a key factor in writing effective feedback. So most teachers write the reports after the lessons have finished. Some write notes during the lesson or have a tab open to record comments. Some have each child's name and the target language already there, so they just need to write a code like G, great, A, attempt. Others remember the language positives and errors and write from memory. So as long as your system helps you write individualised and useful feedback, then that's great. So this last section is a Q&A, answering some common questions that BlingABC teachers have about giving effective feedback. So there'll be 3 oral and 3 written feedback questions. So our first question is, should most of my feedback be correcting errors because Chinese parents and children expect that, or mostly positive feedback so they don't feel discouraged? But as we said before, it's a balance of positive and corrective. The sandwich approach is BlingABC's feedback framework. So positives to start with, corrective to follow, and finish with the positives. So BlingABC's whole ethos is to envelope our error correction with a fun, engaging and encouraging atmosphere which develops a safe language learning environment. Then the children are more likely to take language risks, make attempts, fail, correct themselves without that fear of being embarrassed or anxious. So we can take our students onto their next learning step through that balance of positivity and effective correction. Should I correct a child's error in front of everyone even if they're embarrassed or nervous? Well, ideally we want each child to have individual corrective feedback, but we do need to take into account their sensitivity to receiving correction, especially in front of their peers. So sometimes we sense it won't be appropriate for a particular child to receive individual correction. So we can do delayed feedback, so give the child a lot of encouragement and positive feedback for their language attempts, then pop them back up and perhaps do a group correction for their error. Sometimes if we give them individual error correction anyway, then they're obviously looking a bit fragile or embarrassed, it can lead to them just shutting down, disengaging, or just leaving the lesson. So it's far better that they stay in the lesson, even if they're just listening, rather than being disengaged or absent. This week I had an older student who was obviously distressed about something, and I could tell she wasn't comfortable being corrected. So I just paired her up with another student each time. I brought her down from that pronunciation focus, the ask and answer, the dialogue. So she did stay for the whole lesson. By the end she was actually producing a little bit of language alongside the paired student, but didn't feel embarrassed or singled out. So our last oral feedback question. What say my student makes loads of errors in one sentence? How do I choose what to feedback? So as teachers, we often have this temptation to try and fix everything, in a sentence, but we have to focus on the most productive feedback. So less is more. So there are 3 simple things just to think of at the back of our minds. The first one is prioritising the target language for correction. Second one, just choose one error to correct, rather than lots of errors, which can be confusing and unproductive. And number 3, target the errors at the appropriate language level. So for example, for level 3, it would be more appropriate for the pronoun he and she to be corrected than perhaps a high level error like future tense. So as an example, one of my students spontaneously produced a great sentence, "We go fish in the July." So I praised him for constructing the sentence, but then I just picked one error to correct, the unnecessary "the" before July, because the months of the year were the target vocab. I didn't correct the verb ending with him directly, but he heard the correct form when I repeated his correct sentence. He said, "That's right, we go fishing in July." Excellent. Now onto our written feedback questions. What should I or can I include in my written feedback reports? So you can use an informal chatty style, start off with some positive comments, the student's participation, engagement, enthusiasm. Some teachers even include things like how great the children's drawings were that lesson. You can write about what they learnt during that day in class, and then a couple of positive things they did well, sentence structure, using the target language correctly, expression. After that, write a couple of items they need to work on at home, and then of course finish with some positive comments. You can mention mild behaviour, but try and do it in a positive way. It would be great next time, Lily, if you could listen a bit more so you can learn some more vocabulary. Okay, on to another written feedback question. What shouldn't I include in my written feedback reports? So spelling errors are obvious, so having Grammarly or a similar spelling check on your device is helpful for that. Idiomatic words and phrases shouldn't be used. Goof lesson, rad class, abbreviations, TBH. Don't write about serious bad behaviour, giving the finger, swearing. You need to talk to your TA or your ding talk rep during or after the lesson, and they'll talk to the parent. And again, don't mention the parents' involvement in lessons. That's something you need to talk to the TEA or DING rep about, and they can have a chat to the parent if their presence in the lessons isn't very helpful. So a big issue for teachers is regarding cut and paste. So BlingABC's policy is that teachers can cut and paste what the students have learnt in the lesson, because that's the same. But what each child did well and what they need to work on must be personalised. We know it's more time consuming, but the parents do need to know that the teacher understands where the child's at as a language learner. Parents do notice if the child's name's incorrect, obviously. It can happen with cut and paste, and it is the #1 complaint from parents about written feedback. Sometimes parents do know each other. They may read another child's report, and if it's almost identical to their child's one, then that's not going to be a good look. And on to our last question. Okay, what do I write for the absent student who only turned up for a minute or two or popped in and out, but they're still registered by the system as attending? Well, some teachers write the word absent 80 times, but BlingABC wants us to write a bit more useful report. So they suggest a couple of positive opening comments. Sorry you couldn't stay for the whole lesson, we missed you. Then an outline of the lesson content, topic, target language, a couple of items for them to practice at home, very much like the same content as for the other students. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So thanks for watching. Have a great time teaching your students and giving them lots of effective, positive and corrective feedback. Bye.